A little river of blood found the crevice where the metal sheets of the floor were welded together. It flowed lazily, illuminated by the fluorescent light flickering from just outside the shelter door. Quiet sniffles were stifled by Fatima's hand. If she was not careful, it would hear them. The blood's path split when it met her shoe, turning into two tiny tributaries. She held her son close. In struggling bursts, he tried futilely to break free. He couldn't understand why he was being held so tight or why his mother was gagging him. Mucus made streaks on his grimy skin, mingling with tears that flowed freely. Fatima made no effort to wipe away her own. They fell silently to the floor. It continued to feast. The sound of tearing flesh turned her insides. The wet, sucking sound of one of its many mouths pulling down its meal made her gag. She swallowed the bile that came up from her empty stomach. Her world had been forever altered. It started with the storm sirens. They weren't uncommon during this season. The dust storms were awful and came without warning. David had only just put them into their shelter at the center of the house when frantic banging came at the door. They assumed it was a neighbor seeking refuge. What else could it have been? Another sound of ripping flesh came from the front room, and two new streams of blood slid under the shelter's entrance, collecting in a small pool before her feet. She heard her baby boy's lungs struggling to pull in air. Like most in the imperial factory city of Badash Shahar, his lungs had been choked with generations of smog and dust. She was suffocating him. Fatima kissed her son's head silently and eased her hand from the death grip it had on his lips. She held a finger to her mouth and gently pat moisture from her son's face with her apron. He blinked wide, wet, searching eyes at her. She pulled the worn cloth gag from his mouth and kissed his forehead again. He immediately tried to speak, drawing on his limited vocabulary, but her hand met his mouth quickly. Fatima shook her head no. Her son took ragged breaths around her hand. He said nothing, but sobbed and made a pitiful whimper. The horrific noises of feasting stopped. The silence rang out like death knells. From just outside their tiny shelter, Fatima heard heavy, wet flesh slithering. The terrible sliding noise was punctuated by weighty smacks of tentacles and limbs as it propelled itself forward. Fatima mustered the courage to look out the peephole. An awful decision. The harsh white of the single light in the home flickered as it bumped into the ceiling. It filled the tiny house nearly end to end. Its form was one Fatima would previously have believed only existed in nightmares from the most troubled mind. Yet somehow, it was here, before her in all its madness. Humanoid limbs stuck out at odd angles, with no purpose, and squid-like tentacles thrashed about as it eased forward. A multitude of eyes were scattered across the surface of the fleshy heap. They jerked side to side, blinking rapidly as they searched the room. A plethora of mouths snapping open and closed filled the gaps between the eyes. The creature made its way slowly towards the shelter. The fleshy limbs it used to pull itself forward made wet noises as they sent droplets of her husband's blood flying. David. His final moments assaulted her mind unbidden. A second after he opened the front door, it was atop him. Teeth from a dozen mouths tore at his neck. He tried to gurgle out something, but Fatima was already in the shelter when it started. She couldn't hear his last words. She had only watched for the briefest moment. The monstrosity had ripped her love's throat out in less time than it took to pull herself away. She couldn't bear it. Fatima knew she would have screamed or sobbed and brought the thing down on them sooner. She had silenced her son, then listened. She couldn't cover her ears to block out the sounds, for fear her son would scream. She was forced to hear his demise. But now, she saw. David didn't even resemble a human. He looked like some carcass torn at by a pack of wild beasts, just a meal for a starved predator. Oh, David. Oh, Emperor protect. My lovely. She silenced the thought. She was spiraling. Her vision blurred from the shakes of terror that washed over her body. Frozen, she watched as it continued its approach. It would pass. It had to pass them over. Then she could... What? Run to the neighbors and have them be eaten too? If they aren't already. Maybe there was another way. Aura. Her baby. She had to do this for him. She had to do something. The last pistol. It's taped under the sink, just 10 feet away. Just outside the shelter. But it's illegal. She chased the stupid thought away. If there was any law and order, it would be here. It would purge this unclean abomination. She tore herself from the peephole and looked at her son. His chest rose and fell quickly. He might have an attack soon. He was holding back coughing even now. Purpose filled her. She pulled her son closer. The creature was just outside. Its bulk blocked out the light beyond. But it did nothing. Maybe it wasn't sure if they were there or not. Maybe it was simply taking its time, letting the fear rise in its prey. Fatima dipped low and whispered so quietly that nearly no noise escaped her lips. Aura, stay behind Mommy. Understand? He stared at her blankly. Stay behind me, sweet baby. Okay? You can nod. It's all right. Mommy won't stop you. Tears welled up in his eyes and fell in large fat drops as he nodded in jerks. Fatima swallowed the fear rising in her chest and did the last thing she wanted to. A tear-streaked smile forced its way across her face. It'll be okay, sweetie. You just do exactly what Mommy says. Another tearful nod. A loud bang came at the shelter door. Aura screeched fearfully, and they both jumped. The monster roared from its scores of mouths and threw itself at the door. The sound was deafening in the metal shelter. The walls rattled as it beat its appendages at different parts of the thick entrance. The assault rattled the shelter like no storm ever had. Fatima's son's cry sent adrenaline pumping through her veins. She turned and slamming her shoulder into the side door, dragging Aura behind her. The door swung open wide, banging on the wall it hinged on. With all the speed she could muster, she sprinted to the sink, leaving bloody footprints in her wake. She seized the last pistol. With one hand, she kept Aura behind her, keeping his arm in a vice grip. She leveled the weapon at the creature. A few of its many eyes had tracked her, and now it writhed quickly towards her. Fear sent tremors down her spine, but there was something else. Rage. Rage that something so vile would come for her family. The flood of emotion filled her with resolve. She clung to the anger and let it turn her legs to lead. She would not run. You won't take him! The last pistol fired, and a blinding red light filled the room. The beam of energy punched into the creature, hollowing out a deep hole in its mass. It screeched. Its bulk was everything. All she could see. It was madness manifest. The end of her family. Its form stretched into forever. She fired over and over in rapid succession. It kept coming despite the holes ripped into it. It smashed itself across the kitchen table. Tentacles and limbs lashed out to grab her. She screamed and fired at it, pulling Aura tighter to herself. A blast went straight into a wide mouth. As it flew into the monster, it illuminated an infinite darkness. There was only black inside of it, only void. A mouth latched onto her arm. Sharp needle teeth sunk deep past her skin, her tendons, then scratched at her bones. She couldn't feel her fingers, couldn't feel the pistol. She let go of Aura and grasped behind her, finding a knife on the counter. Pain and rage drove the blade home into a wide, bloodshot eye. It seemed to heal around the knife. As the flesh knit together, it jerked the knife from her hand and pulled the mundane blade inside of itself. The mouth that had her other arm spun in a perfect circle independent of the body. With a rip and a crunch, everything beneath her elbow was gone. She began kicking at it and pushed her son towards the back door.
Run! Run! Don't stop, baby, run!
Aura stumbled and backed away from his mother, using legs that had only recently learned to walk. She wanted to lead the thing away from Aura, give her baby a chance to live, no matter how small. Fatima pushed away from it, her arms spurting blood onto its fleshy exterior. It undulated, reveling in the fear of it all. Fatima tried to run in the opposite direction she'd sent her son, but she slipped in her own blood. Her forehead collided with the metal floor. Stars spun in her vision, and the world darkened. She twisted about on the floor, attempting to defend herself from the creature. She threw her other arm to stop it. A mouth clamped down onto her shoulder. The gaping thing with its razor teeth slid side to side and gnawed at the flesh, savoring the blood, the pain. Aura froze at the sight and began sobbing. The world was fading to black. She tried to shake it away to no avail. From the depths of her lungs, she mustered a ragged yell.
Run!
Aura covered his eyes and turned running as fast as his legs could carry him towards the exit. And then, an angel appeared. A halo shone and shimmered, framing a massive skull set atop an equally massive frame. The angel's steps beat heavy on the floor, denting the metal beneath armored green sabatons. Tima tried to blink away the hallucination, but it went nowhere. The halo flared a bright white as the angel said something. Its voice was rich in timbre, even as it yelled out battle cries laden with prayer. With a frighteningly quick and mighty hand, the angel scooped up Aura. The other hand clutched a weapon blessed with purity seals. It fired holy bolts at the monster, knocking it away from her. Fatima took the chance to crawl towards her baby boy. She crawled towards the holy angel wreathed in its otherworldly glow. As Fatima's world turned to blackness, she crawled towards the light. To Fatima's surprise, she awoke, screaming. A scarred, red-eyed, charcoal black face smiled down at her. "It is all right, madam. All is well." Frantically, she looked about. "Aura, my boy, where is he?" The war-weary face gave a smile that brightened his demeanor. He looked just behind her head and gestured towards a giant soldier, an angel, in green power armor. He was squatting low before springing into the air. Aura sat on the shoulder of the giant and giggled loudly each time he took flight. When Fatima looked back into the red eyes of the soldier, the twin fires there seemed less threatening, much more human. In those red embers, there was death and destruction, but it was not directed towards her. There was a burning passion, but not for killing. Those eyes held a calming warmth for her. Fatima looked about and saw she was one of hundreds. All around her were civilians recovering from various injuries, laid out on makeshift stretchers in the street. They were encircled by these mighty men. On their pauldrons, they bore the orange heads of some fantastical lizard creature. The Emperor's angels? They're real? She met her rescuer's eyes again, and he took what was left on her arm gently into his hand, before raising it for her to see. It was not a bleeding, torn hunk of flesh as it had been. It still hurt, but it looked to be months into the healing process, instead of the mere hours she figured had passed.
Emperor protect! A true miracle!
I am Apothecary Kur Zadai of the 5th Company of Salamanders, proud member of the Adeptus Astartes. We are here to save all those that we can. And who are you? He actually seemed to care.
Now, this is madness. Fatima.
Her voice was small and ragged with the recent bouts of yelling.
That is Fatima Althir. I'm a sand sifter from the Lower Nines district. And thank you, my lord.
She tried to bow from her seated position. It was difficult. It is a pleasure, Fatima. The angel rose to his feet. Even with no walls to compare his height to, he was huge. Orion, bring the boy over. She is awake.
Aura screamed out in elated, "Mommy!"
and sprinted towards her. The impact of her son forced air from her lungs and caused a searing pain in her arm. She pulled her baby close. The few tears she had left fell and made wet spots on her son's shirt. Evacuations will begin shortly, Fatima. The angel donned his helmet. His voice, now modulated by the Voxcaster, sounded less human.
Keep your son close, and move when we tell you. The enemy still seeks slaughter, but we will be your shield as long as we stand.
The angel nodded to her, and then began walking towards what looked to be a storm bunker, with a crowd of frightened civilians gathered around it. Fatima held her son as she looked to the skies. They were choked with the black smoke of fires that no one was putting out. The city was burning alive, with all of them trapped inside.